All right, we are back with a Saturday night edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines as Florida State clinches a spot in the ACC championship game on December 2nd after coming back in the second half to win against Pitt 24-7, going to the locker room 10-7 in what was a ugly game, at least offensively early. FSU's defense played good throughout, was really a key to the game, that and Jordan Travis. But my name is Pat Burnham. I am joined by former FSU offensive lineman and Osceola football analyst Mark Salva, and of course by Osceola recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein. All right, Mark, just give me your overall thoughts on the game as FSU makes it to the ACC championship game, I think for the first time since 2014. Does that sound right?
Yeah. It's funny. I recognize that game. I've been in a lot of those games where you just can't seem to get out of your own way, and for whatever reason, the juice just isn't there. Now, we're in a different place, in a different geography, playing a different team. We're short two of our key playmakers, and for whatever reason, and it's inexplicable. Sometimes you just can't get out of your own way sometimes. And then a part of it is the matchup, right? Pitt was always going to be, have it schemed up pretty well. Narduzzi is the defensive coach, and, he had a plan for our offense, and not having Keon and Johnny obviously made that even easier. So what basically, I guess he just felt like, we're going to give you the low percentage throws. And I always thought that they would struggle offensively. Now, they fell into some things, and they took a couple shots, and they hit on one or two. You got them 7 points. So, you know what? It is what it is. I'm not gonna overreact on this one for sure. Look, we got out with a win on the road. This was the game that everybody pointed to before the season. Everybody said this is the game right before Miami that we need to worry about. And it held to be true. I know they're only 2-6, and I know there's style points. But the bottom line to me is, if we don't go undefeated, we're not going in anyways. So I don't really think it matters about style points for us.
Well, listen, I think when to that point, when they get ready to vote again on Tuesday night or Monday, whenever they start to get together, I think that it's going to be notated that they were without Keon Coleman and without Johnny Wilson, two of their best players, and obviously were able to take care of business and get the win. Right. And really, once you got up by 3 scores, this game was over because
over. But here's the thing about the committee that kind of gets at me. I didn't mean to get on this tangent, but they better also acknowledge that Ohio State struggled with a bad team.
Yep.
That all the other schools today that struggled against less than teams, they need to acknowledge that too, not just us. Right. Yep. Anyway, all right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Listen, the defense was dominant. Once they got by 3 scores, I thought it was. I felt pretty good about it. I even sent out a tweet about it. Listen, that should do it. Well, the way the defense is playing, at least if they don't fall apart. Fish, what were just your overall thoughts? And Mark, I want to bring it back to you with the question about the offense.
Yeah, I mean, once again, they got off to a slow start. It's something about this team. They don't do real well in the first half of games. It seems like they need. Norvell says something at halftime. They just seem to click better in the second half this year. You asked me like 2 weeks ago which game would be harder, Pitt or Wake Forest, and I had told you that Pitt's not as bad as their record. I know they're 2-7 or 2-8, whatever they are. They should have beat Wake Forest. Their quarterback's not a bad quarterback. They have some pretty decent players, but I think they've been unfortunate a little bit this year. So it's not shocking that the game was closer than it should have been. It just was very kind of sloppy game. Florida State lacked the firepower without Keon Coleman in there. That's a concern moving forward. If Keon and Johnny can't play, they're gonna be more of a 10-yard, 15-yard type offense at a time and they just didn't seem to be able to really stretch the field other than one long pass to Ja'Kai, which was like 37 yards. But I think that Morlock may have had a nice long catch too, but.
Yeah, 64-yard catch.
It seemed like they did struggle to stretch the field today. Guys didn't really look like they were getting separation from the Pitt DBs. So that's a little bit of a concern. But overall, you got to just keep winning and move on.
Yeah, listen, I think it really shows you what Keon and Johnny mean to the entirety of what this offense can do, right? I mean, they could not run the ball effectively today outside of one big run, which was a touchdown run. You can't take that off the board. It's 55 yards, a great little A-gap play inside zone. I think it was, Mark. It might have been some counteraction. I can't recall exactly what it was, but they hit it up the middle, a great block. They sealed the linebacker who got caught up looking inside, and Trey was off to the races. But, Mark, listen – I was not at practice this week. I don't know who practiced, but let me ask you this: I'm assuming that neither one of them practiced, or they got very limited reps. But let's talk about this: when you're without arguably your two best players outside of Jordan Travis, and you could throw, I think you could say Johnny and Trey are about the same as far as importance to this offense. But obviously, Keon is your second best player after Jordan Travis. You're coming into this ball game. You're on the road. You could say you can go in and practice whatever you're going to do on offense without these guys against your scout team, and you can obviously do some good on good during the week. But it doesn't resemble what you're going to face on a Saturday. The speed, the intensity. How long? It did take Florida State some time to find their rhythm on offense, but at one point I think they scored their touchdown. I think they scored on 4 or 5 possessions at some point. I have to go back and look at the drive chart. But you've been in this situation before where you're missing a really good player on offense or good players on offense. How long should it take? And what challenges does that present to Mike Norvell and trying to find what they can do on offense once the whistle blows and those downs count? It's not practice anymore.
Well, I mean, look, it's funny you bring this up because in the course of the game, I was thinking to myself, for the first time, I don't know that we have enough offense. In other words, I don't know that we have enough plays. I don't know that we have enough in the game plan to counter what we're encountering during the course of the game. We came out, tried to run a little bit, threw a lot of screens. I was shocked that Jordan had 230-something yards passing at the half.
Yes, yeah, it was a weird 230, right? I mean,
right. It was all screen. It was a lot of screens and a couple of long throws. So I was shocked by that. And so I don't care how you move the ball as long as you move the ball. I think for me, did they hold stuff back? Right? Did they go in the game? Not with not enough. That was my thought. Kind of during that during the quagmire. And so, I don't know, but I'll say this. And, look, the game plan, several people have done this game plan against us now. Clemson did it. I don't know, not so much LSU. Boston College did it. Going down the list here, I think Syracuse tried to, but they just weren't very good. Bottom line, they're gonna jam up the run. They're gonna outnumber you in the box. They're gonna be aggressive in the box. And they're going to man your receivers, and they're going to force Jordan to throw low percentage throws, right? And they're low percentage for a reason. So, yeah, it gets frustrating. He's throwing these back shoulder fades or these over the top, slot fades and stuff. And, you hit 1 out of 3. Well, that's by definition, they're low percentage throws. Now, unless you have the same, like you have Johnny Wilson or Keon Coleman, who are just athletically better, and now they're a little bit higher percentage than normal. But when when things are a little more even, like they were today, where our receivers are not necessarily kicking guys loose, now you're like 1 out of 3. And so we didn't hit them early, but we hit a bunch late, right? Yep. And so the percentages caught up to them, right? And but when teams are going to scheme us in this way, then our answer has to be the offensive line has to take over the game. And so far, they have not demonstrated the ability to do it, right?
Right.
They got to be able to move guys out of the way. They got to create seams, whether you do it by angles or you do it by, formationing, whatever it is you have to do to get guys moving, so they just can't just sit there and jam up the holes and knock you in the gap and keep you standing there. We got to figure it out because other teams are going to try it. I guarantee Miami's going to try it. I guarantee Miami's going to jam up the running game and they're going to play man and force Jordan to beat them either with his legs, or try to hit him in, or they're going to try to do some low percentage throws. And, it's going to catch up to us if we don't figure out a way to block people better. And the offensive line, I'm going to tell you, they're underperforming in my eyes. They really are in the running game. I know Trey broke that long one, and you know what? when they're going to run their linebackers downhill like that and they're going to jam it up like that, I'm there screaming, I'd like run a trap or run a zone where you do exactly what they did that split Trey. I don't know why it took us so long to do. They kept trying to run outside zone encounters. They finally hit an A-gap zone play, and they split them. I mean, they should have done that second quarter, right? Into the first quarter. I mean, you knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
So until the offensive line in that running game decides that they're, there's going to be a time people are going to say, that's how you got to beat us. And it's going to bite us in the butt eventually.
Yeah. Outside of the Trey Benson run, which was a huge run, right? It went for a score. You're 36 for a little bit under 90 yards. And listen, you got to be able to run the ball. And I did say a couple of weeks ago in one of our Takeaway Tuesday articles that the one thing I do like about Florida State, and this was looking at the big picture ACC championship, with games against Pitt, Miami, Florida, and obviously looking at the college football playoff picture. I said that one thing that I like about Florida State is Jordan Travis is good enough to carry your offense when it's having a bad day. And listen, I said that not knowing that Keon Coleman was not going to be in the ball game and Johnny Wilson was not going to be in the ball game. I was talking about when it was a bad day when they were fully stocked. I think it speaks to just what kind of player Jordan Travis is that they're able to go back and rely on his arm. Because listen, I thought they would run him more. He only had 7 runs and it was for minus 15 yards. Of course, a couple of those were sacks, but they didn't, even in this ball game, Mark and Fish, they did not have to go to Jordan's leg expressly. Again, only 7 attempts, so it surprised me that they didn't run him more, knowing that they were struggling running the ball with the running backs. But Fish, just your thoughts on Travis, 22 of 36, 363, and then really you got to give a tip of the cap, Ja'Kai Douglas, 6 catches on 9 targets for 115 yards. He's not quite the playmaker that Keon or Johnny is, but listen, football is a next man up mentality, and Ja'Kai Douglas did come through for Florida State. Kyle Morlock obviously had a big 4 catches for 80 yards. One of those he broke a tackle, forced a missed tackle, and got FSU into deep into Florida Pitt territory. But just talk a little bit about Fish, about Jordan Travis, and what he means, and what you thought of his performance today.
Listen, I'm critical of Jordan when I need to be with him. There was somebody on one of the message boards posts that was like, "Oh, put Tate Rodemaker in now." I don't think he was the problem today. I thought he played very well. I think that he actually, if he didn't play, they probably would have lost the game or been in a much tighter game. He kept him out of a lot of bad situations. He was pressured when he didn't need to be. I agree. I don't think the offensive line played extremely well. The run game wasn't consistent enough. And Jordan had to do a lot. He had to play with he was not comfortable a lot of times today. And that's not how Florida State's going to win a national championship or do well in the playoffs. If he's under this type of duress, they can't beat a Georgia or one of those top teams. That's what I believe. He played above his skill set today. I thought he did very well, and I don't think he was the reason that game was. I think the reason the game was where it ended up was all because of him.
Yeah, well, listen, I think the game was the way it was, particularly on offense, because of the struggles of the offensive line. To your point, Mark, your thoughts on this too. Jordan didn't look good in the first half because he was constantly under pressure. Whether they were blitzing more than they could pick up or just weren't picking up the guys they were supposed to pick up. There were a lot of rush throws in the first half. I can't tell you how many times I wrote on my notes, pressure, incompletion. So a lot of his incompletions were forced incompletions because of the pressure. And what I thought was interesting, Mark, and I'll have to go back to verify it, but Pitt seemed to bring a ton of pressure in the first half and then mix it up a little bit more in the second half between pressure and coverage, which I didn't understand. I mean, maybe Florida State formation them or was motioning them out of that. But just talk about what you thought about Jordan, because listen, I thought he carried the day for FSU offensively. I do not understand anybody that would want Jordan Travis replaced by Travis Rodemaker or anybody else on the roster, particularly when you're out Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. I mean, that's just absurd. But talk about Jordan Travis and, what you thought about his performance. And listen, and go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so I don't know how many 3-and-outs we had first half. We had a bunch.
I can tell you. Hold on one second.
I think at one point we had like 3 or 4 in a row, 3-and-outs. And so, and it goes back to getting behind the chains, right? So the inability to run the ball. I know we tried to run the ball a lot on first down early in the game and didn't get anything. Then we get behind
5 in-outs in the game, Mark, at a 14.
Yeah. I think we had like 3 or 4 in the first half, like right.
3 in a row, yep. It's in the second quarter.
Yeah. So, later in the game, we started throwing it more on first down. At least that's how it feels to me. And we'll go back and check. That's kind of how it feels to me. But getting behind the chains and getting in 2nd and 9 and 3rd and 12, I mean, of course, you're going to look kind of disjointed. There's not that's not a way to sustain drives, and that's not a way to run an offense. So for whatever reason, we really were getting behind the chains early. And I bet so. You know what? He didn't turn the ball over, right? I mean, he didn't have a pick today, right?
No.
I mean, to me, that was going to be a big key. I know that LT fumbled early. That was always going to be a key. And then we went for 4th down, and then 4th down. I didn't have a problem going for the 4th down there. I really did early in the game. After that first series or so, looking at our defense versus their offense, you're like, okay, so we went for it on 4th down, didn't get it. We didn't know points were going to be at such a premium early, but you always had, by doing it early, you have time to catch up and make up for it. So I didn't have a problem with that. So those were 2 situations there early in the game where, we kind of, it makes it feel a little worse than it is. And then we get those 3-and-outs and get behind. So, yeah, it's that, it was just a quagmire. And more that happens, more Pitt gained confidence. But you know what? I never got the feeling Jordan was ever panicking, right? I really didn't get that Mike was even panicking. I feel like it was just, okay, to their credit, they always say next play. And that's kind of what it was. And you knew that thing was going to break because, look, in order for Pitt to sustain enough offense to outscore us was never going to happen, right? All they had was taking shots, and they hit a few shots. But that's not, again, just like I got done saying for us, that's not a way to run an offense for them. This year wasn't. And the more they had to do that, the more our defensive front impacted the game with the pass rush and stuff. It wasn't working. So, to me, that's just kind of how that game went. I think Travis, because of George Travis, is why we got the result that we got.
Yeah, and listen, they found something towards the second half of the second quarter. They had a 10-play, 75-yard drive for a touchdown, followed by a 7-play, 61-yard drive, then came out and really dominated the third quarter. They had 3 drives in the quarter, one that was 3 and out, but then the other one was 11 for 80 and 2 for 85. So really the bulk of their yardage and success came in the middle of the game. Did you see them do something different on offense that they had not been doing early, or was it just execution?
Yeah, so no, it's just execution. I mean, they hit a couple of plays. They did, like I said, the first 2 series was a fumble and a turnover on down. So now you're already into the second quarter. So yeah, it was just better execution. And Pitt's putting a lot of pressure on us. Hit a few plays. By the way, I need to say that play that Biscuit scored on, that was awesome. That
was a great play call.
They had Pitt's secondaries running around, not knowing what to do.
They had the left tackle lined up in the right slot.
Lined up in the slot. That was awesome. They didn't know what to do.
That was probably that might have been the play of the game. I'll have to go back in my notes and see where that happened. But yes,
that play put it out of reach, and that might have been in the Miami back pocket, but he had to pull it out for this game. Who knows?
Yeah, well, listen, we thought it was going to be Pitt pulling out all the stops. Instead, Florida State pulls out its Biscuit out of his basket and gets him into the end zone. All right, so listen, offense was good enough without Keon and Johnny. Jordan was tremendous. Obviously, the offensive line has some work to do. We can talk a little bit later in the week about, or maybe later in the show, about how Florida State looks at a Miami game plan if they're going to be without Keon and Johnny. But let's go over to the defense, man, because they were unbelievable all day long. I think Pitt probably had a little bit more success in the pass game, but they had obviously an 82-yard or 81-yard completion that was fumbled out of the end zone, which would have been 82 if they'd scored. Other than that, there wasn't a lot of success. Florida State did the same thing to Pitt that Pitt did to Florida State's offense. They were constantly pressuring. They could not run the ball with any margin of success. just talk about Fish. Or Jerry, you're joining us now, and Jerry is our defensive specialist. He's our linebacker guru. But Jerry, obviously, what were your thoughts on the defense? And then since you are just joining us, I think we really stress the fact that what's important out of this game is Florida State is still 8-0 and has locked down a spot in Charlotte. So just for the ACC title game. So just talk a little bit about your thoughts on that, and then what you saw from the defense.
Yeah, 9-0, and locked into the ACC championship game is a good thing.
Yep.
Yeah, defensively, I'm with Mark. I never thought that Pitt was a factor. And I just felt like, their offense was not a threat. And I felt like as Pitt's defense played, as you guys wrote in your previews, they're a pretty good defense. They're a little bit difficult. They can make it tough on you. But I felt like if Pitt's offense just kept going 3 and out, that the Pitt defense would eventually either grow tired or lose their will. And as long as Florida State just kept pounding at them without turning it over, they were going to bust the rock eventually. And I think that's what happened. I think in that third quarter, Pitt's defense FSU's offense was too much for them.
Yeah, I think they wore them down for sure.
Yeah.
As the game went on. Listen, Florida State's defense, they had 14 drives to defend. Out of those 14 drives, 12 were for 5 plays or less by Pitt. Their longest drive by play was 8 for 21 yards. Their longest drive with any success was 4 plays for 64 yards, which resulted in a touchdown. The defensive line was as dominant as we thought they were. We saw some more success in the passing game. But listen, this defense the last 5 weeks has played unbelievably well. We're fixing to get a different test next week, but just talk about the job that you guys think Adam Fuller has done with this defense when really coming into October, there were still some questions about this unit, particularly against the pass.
Yeah, and I thought on that score, Pat, I really thought that not having Akeem Dent after the LSU game, there was he pulled a hamstring or something, and he was out for 3 or 4 games. And that's where we had the communication breakdowns. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we started playing better on the back half when your 5th year or 6th year senior returned. I think he's given you some stability back there because other than him at safety, the only other guy was Shaheem, who, had very limited experience at safety. So I think it coincides with Dent's return. I think if nothing else, that Dent stabilizes the communications back there. But that's what I think. Mark, what's your take on our defensive improvement second half?
Yeah, no, I think I said this last week when I was in Winston-Salem. I just watched the secondary a ton. I was really impressed. And I think that, I never really thought about it, but that's probably the reason why having a key back there does make a difference. Because the issues were in communication. We were cutting guys loose. Guys were running free in the secondary. A lot of confusion. Shifts and motions that made guys kind of freak out a little bit. And that has gone away in the last month or so, last 5 games. And we seem to be at least in position and not always making the play. But at least we got guys around the ball, and we seem to have gotten more turnovers and stuff lately. Now, at times we don't crowd the box like a lot of teams do, and that's just not Adam's thing, and I'm okay with that, because our red zone defense has been damn good. So that I'm okay with that for right now. So that's a good reason as any, Jerry, is having Akeem back, but everybody else too. I mean, even the linebackers that you see, you saw Monday make a great play on an outbreaking play from the tight end. I thought, on a blitz too, so he came from the whole other side. That was a nice play, and first 2-3 games he's not making that play.
Right.
Well, listen, we're talking about making great plays. Let's talk about that Fitzgerald Cypress strip because this game is, I'm not going to say it's going to turn out much different than it did, but certainly took 7 points off the board. And that was a great hustle play, right? I mean, there was a break. I don't know whether the defensive back got beat or breakdown in coverage. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and watch. But the one thing you can say is Fitzgerald Cypress went after that ball and got it out and really took the Pitt would have had some real momentum if they had scored there and was able to turn that ball back over to Florida State's offense. But Fish, just your thoughts on the defense?
Yeah, I still have concerns with the back end. I thought Dent did play well. I think a lot of the success is they haven't played really good offenses, and I think that when they step up and you get into the ACC championship, you play a Louisville. You get into the playoffs, and they got to play teams that could actually throw the football with a quality quarterback. I think the back end's still a problem. I could be dead wrong. I think you're going to have a problem when you see better teams. Look at who they've played. I mean, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Duke, quarterback was hurt, Wake, and Pitt. These aren't great offenses, and I think
Jaden Daniels is pretty good.
What?
Jaden Daniels is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I just think they're going to struggle when they play better offenses. But so far, they've done a good job against the teams that are in front of them. But looking at big picture, I have concerns with the back end of the defense still. I see guys get open. These teams just can't get guys the ball because their offenses aren't really that good right now. So,
I guess if there's some good news in that, Fish, is Miami and Florida, neither one are juggernauts on offense. They're kind of inconsistent football teams. They have been all year. You don't ever know what version of Tyler Van Dyke you're going to get. Certainly, Florida has struggled, although I think they pulled out a win today against Arkansas. I'm not sure.
No, they lost.
All right. So they did lose today. I know that game went to overtime, but Florida State started, and I ignored all other football games when that happened.
Miami's a totally different animal. They're a old school. They like to play in a phone booth. That game's they're gonna try to keep that game to a 2017 game. This is gonna be a punch it in the mouth type thing. I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of offense or Miami really be able to attack that secondary. I'm saying as they get deeper into the season, when you're talking ACC championship, wanting to win there and making it into the playoffs, I've seen the top teams play. Those teams can pass on Florida State. I'm telling you, it's going to happen when they play. There's too many breakdowns. I've seen it all the way from the LSU game till now. It's just these teams have not been able to take advantage of it. It's just they've done very well against the teams they played, but I still think there's weaknesses in that secondary. But that's, like I said, that's my opinion. I could be dead wrong.
Well, you have seen Miami play Fish in person. We have not.
Yeah.
What particularly about Miami worries you from an offensive standpoint against Florida State on defense?
I think Miami is the most physical team that FSU is going to have played this year, even more than LSU. I was very surprised watching them in person, how physical they are on the O-line and D-line. They're like an SEC school, very physical up front. They want to just play in a phone booth. They want to wear you out. They body blow you with body blows, and they're trying to get that game to the fourth quarter next week. That's their goal, and finally wear you out in the fourth quarter. And that's what they've done the last 2 weeks. The games are ugly. They want to make it an ugly game with the style they play, but that's how they play.
Hey, Mark, can you hang on for one more final question before I know you got to go? All right, so to Fish's point, Miami is coming in. Florida State take care of business today. What did you see that Florida State did today that if they were going to be without Keon and Johnny next week, and we don't know that's the case. I have a feeling that one of the reasons they rested them today was not to try to guarantee that and listen, we don't know the extent of those injuries, so I am just totally hypothesizing here. But I'm assuming that they rested them, hoping to get them back for Miami, thinking that they were good enough that they could handle Pitt without two of their best players. What did you see today that Florida State can build on offense if they don't have Keon and or Johnny next week? Obviously, if they get either one of them back, it kind of changes how they can game plan. But what did you see today that they can hang their hat on?
Well, here's the deal, right? If whoever you put out there, they got to cover, right? So You put Portier out there, you put Williamson out there, they're going to line people up and cover. Where else do you like your matchups? Well, we always seem to like Jaheim Bell. This seems to be a thing. More like seems to be Ja'Kai. Maybe there's some offense in there that we can generate. We got Benson, we got Toafili. We still got weapons, right? So even though those two guys aren't out there, you're going to put somebody out there, and they're going to put two corners over the top of them, right? And so now where's the matchup going to be? And I don't know. I haven't studied Miami enough yet to know, about their safeties, their linebackers. I know they're usually pretty good, right? So do we have a matchup there that we can do? And look, bottom line is the offensive line's got to have to show up. If we don't have those guys, they have to show up, and they got to move guys out of the way. They got to create scenes, and either we got to, scheme it, or we got to, or somehow we got to figure it out, right? Or those guys got to decide that they're just going to get better. Because I saw a couple of things. I'm not going to get technical here, but I saw a lot of little things that I'm like, you know what? That's a good offensive line doesn't do that, right? And there was I saw a couple of things like that throughout the course of the game today. I'm like, that's just basic. That shouldn't happen, right? So they got to get better. There's things they can clean up for sure. So that's that. And look, you got Jordan Travis.
Yep.
The great equalizer.
Well,
right?
well, listen, I said earlier in the week that Jordan Travis can carry you on a bad day when you're struggling on offense, and he certainly did that today. And he got a little help from a couple of his friends, Ja'Kai Douglas and Kyle Morlock in particular. Listen, they've got to come up with some ways to get the ball to the tight ends outside of the screen, because people are going to start keying in on that. But Pitt certainly
had a nice shot, right?
Yeah.
I think Bell got one too, and Bell caught this, the slot fade last week, and I think he caught it up like that this week. So,
listen, he had Bell and another crosser if he'd gotten time to throw the ball, but it was just not afforded the time to throw the ball.
There's plenty of offense there. And like I said, I don't know that they had enough offense today. I probably kept a lot of stuff in their back pocket, thinking they might not need it. And oh my gosh, they did need it. So I'm not going to worry about it. Honestly, not. I think it'll be okay. All right.
Well, we know you got to go, Mark.
Yep.
We will catch up with you later in the week. Thanks for popping in and joining us. And we'll talk to you early in the week. And we'll
see you in
Charlotte. A
Charlotte.
little Miami preview special with you if you got time in your week next week. But thanks, Mark, and we'll let you go ahead and do your normal sign off, even though we're not entering the show right now.
Go Noles. We're going to Charlotte.
Yeah. Yep, the Noles are going to Charlotte, and I think that's the main thing coming out of this thing. And but Fish, I do want to, while we're talking about the Miami game, listen, you've talked about Miami being physical up front. How do those 11 guys on Miami's defense compared to some of the other defenses Florida State has played this year, in your opinion?
I think their secondary is overachieves this year. Other than James Williams and I think their two safeties are really good. Kitchens and James Williams are really good. The corners will have a lot of problems. If Keon and Johnny Wilson are healthy, they're going to have problems because they're smaller guys. You're talking about Porter, Calps. These guys are 5'8", 5'9", maybe 5'10". They're smaller. I think the matchups favor Florida State in the secondary of Miami. It's the front. Florida State's offensive line has not played well this year, and you look even at the freshmen that Miami has, a defensive end that's been playing tremendous. They're the defensive coordinator they have has done a very good job of mixing up their fronts. They don't just show the same thing all the time. They bring a lot of blitzes. They're very aggressive on defense, and they let those guys in the secondary. One thing I noticed in the Clemson game, Clemson took a lot of shots down the field. They must have taken 15 shots at least of 20 yards or more. So I think that Clemson saw something on that back end that Florida State's going to see a lot of the same things, that the big plays are there. But they're going to try to put pressure with their front seven and try to get to Jordan. I think you're going to see a lot of the same things. They're going to try to flood that middle of the defense. So offensive line so they could stop the run. And they're going to try to make, once again, I think Miami's going to try to make Jordan beat them. And they're going to have to roll some coverage over to Coleman. I really think if Florida State could give Jordan time, he's going to have the ability to get the ball down the field, stretch the field to Coleman and some of those other guys. Because like I said, Clemson went after them over and over and over. They just weren't able to complete the passes. but they took a lot of chances down the field and guys were open on the back end. So.
Yeah, well, listen, the one thing that I think about when we, had this conversation with somebody last night talking about, Florida and Miami are probably two of the more physical teams. You may struggle to run against them, and the comment was made, and it was absolutely correct. I remember when Mike first got here and there was really no offensive line. His ability to manufacture positive plays out of the running game when he was playing without attack. You can definitely say that the group he played with in 2021 was not as talented as the group he's playing with now. I think they were top 25 in rushing, probably a little bit higher than that, to be honest with you. But so I feel a little bit better about that. And Mike is he's an excellent game planner. He figures out a way to create gaps and holes for somebody. And of course, a lot of that's predicated off the fact that they can use Jordan as a running back, and I do think a healthy Jordan Travis will be featured in the run game in those two, the Florida and Miami games. I think that will help kind of offset maybe some of the concerns about the offensive line and the dedicated running game or the running back running game, for lack of a better term. Jerry, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I just, when it comes to Miami, it's you can almost throw out everything from the past. Those two teams will play their best games against each other, and I don't really have a good feel, Pat.
Yeah. Well, we'll get a better feel during the week as we take a look at Miami on tape and start our breakdown of Miami. But listen, obviously FSU got some good news as it pertains to strength of schedule. You get Clemson gets a big win over Notre Dame. That'll help Florida State's case as we move towards Tuesday. Now, we talked a little bit about optics, Jerry. Early in the show, obviously we probably got into it a little bit more than we wanted to. Mark we hit a hot button with Mark. He started talking about optics and how this will play out with the committee on Tuesday. And listen, we all know that the real ranking does not matter until the Sunday after the Florida game. But how do you think, and I'll pose this question to both of you guys. It was not pretty early, but Florida State certainly dominated the game in the second half. It was never in doubt. I don't think it was ever in doubt once they got 2 scores up, let alone 3. How do you think this translates when we come out to the polls on Tuesday? And I obviously say this knowing that, the second poll in the college football playoff committee is almost as useless as the first one, other than it gives us something to talk about. But we know that the committee takes optics into effect. We all do, right? We all in any equation, we all have our eye test, right? Like, I didn't think Ohio State was the top team in the nation last week. I thought I had them 6th. But anyway, how do you guys think this translates on Tuesday?
Well, yeah.
And we don't know the results of all the other games yet. So
right. So if you were on our message boards during the first half of this game, we're awful. We're just awful. And so thankfully, some of our subscribers are not on the committee or we'd be done. But when I look at the end of the first quarter, Florida State had 150 yards of offense.
Yep.
And Pitt had 19.
Yes.
At halftime, Florida State had 300 and something.
Yep.
Or 400. Or no, it was at the end of the third quarter.
Well, listen, they still had 501 for the game.
So we were pacing on a 600-yard offensive game, even in the first quarter.
Yes.
And, but the points weren't coming up. And I'm telling you what, football is not for the faint of hearted.
No,
you can never quit. You just.
Jerry, I just think the biggest thing you have now is everybody has the ability to comment from play to play, whether it's social media or on the internet.
Oh, of course.
It wasn't like that before. Like people used to watch football, and
hey, listen. But let me interrupt you a second there, because this is the point. What I think and what the posters think does not matter.
No.
But if you played this game, you can never let those thoughts enter your head.
No.
Nothing has changed in the game. You have to stay positive. You have to stay true to your game plan, and you have to keep hammering the rock, and it'll eventually break.
Well, and that's exactly what happened today. I mean, you're right. I mean, they had 148 yards in the first quarter, 149 in the second. It was more about putting points on the board than it was anything else. Of course, they chose to take 3 off the board early in the game. I don't quite understand that, but that's fine. Like we said before, no harm, no foul. We know that Mike's going to be aggressive on 4th down. So that makes it a 13-7 game if they kick that field goal at halftime. But listen, and Mark talked a little bit about it. I think it was going to take some time for FSU to find its offensive legs when you are running your first offense in game conditions without Keon and Johnny. I mean, those 2 guys are going to be missed. And listen, it's a next man up mentality. Ja'Kai Douglas had a great game, but you're not going to confuse him with Keon and Johnny. You're not going to confuse anybody on Florida State's roster with Keon or Johnny. Yeah. Now, they've got some other good receivers that just aren't to that level yet, so I think there was going to be a fall-off. And listen, I said this in our preview, Jerry. This was Pitt's season. You knew you were going to get their best effort. They had to pull off an upset to have any chance at a postseason. I am surprised we did not see more chances taken by Pitt, whether it's going for – they had a peculiar late in the third quarter or early in the fourth, they chose to punt it. Now, they would have given FSU the ball inside their own territory if they had not gotten it, but you got to go for it. But look,
it was a 4th and 3. You'd have thought they'd have gone for that.
Yep.
If those 2 don't play, their offense is much different, though. It's not the ability to strike big and stretch the field. I think they become much easier to defend if those 2 guys aren't on the field.
No doubt. No doubt.
Hey, let me interject a story. It's one of my favorite moments with Jimbo Fisher. This was when Jimbo was offensive coordinator, and I was a fundraiser. And I took him to a private dinner with about 8 guys down in Delray Beach. And one of the guys of the 8 was a former FSU running back. And at that time, our offensive line play was awful. And so the running back asked Jimbo, what's it going to take for us to have a running game? And the running back's thinking, and I'm thinking, we got to develop an offensive line, right? That's what you naturally would think. I guess most fans would probably think that. But what Jimbo said was, give me Peter Warwick on one side and Ron Dugans on the other, and we'll have the right numbers in the box to run.
Yep.
And that's what happened tonight. I mean, I heard that conversation in my head while I'm watching it, is you knew they were going to make a heavy box because there's no threat from our young receivers. And they're going to test Jordan and those young receivers. I'm loading the box.
Yep.
And so everybody is asking the question on the message boards, what is wrong with our offensive line? Why can't we run it?
It's a numbers game.
It's a numbers game.
Yep. Yeah, and listen, we talked about that early in the show when talking about the offense. Listen, you understand now what we're talking about when we talk about complementary football. Those receivers complement the run game, and the running backs complement the passing game. And when you're without your 2 best, you're not going to be as efficient and productive as you should be.
So I think the 2-play sequence that was, to my point, I was writing that in this thread, the game thread, the story I just told. And Jordan made an unbelievable back shoulder throw to Ja'Kai Douglas on
down the sideline. Yep.
And the very next play, Benson hit it to the house.
Yep.
And you know damn well the safety got thinking,
Yep.
I mean, so it is complementary football. And we're a much more difficult team to defend in the running game when you have Coleman and Wilson out there.
Yep.
And I mean, today was absolutely convinced me of that. that it's a
one,
real.
they're both very good run blockers. As
Yes, they
receivers.
are.
Yes.
And two, they stretch the field. You don't have to have, like, Johnny Wilson's so big he gets separation because of his size. He puts his hip in a corner with his size and length. He gets separation. These guys don't know those tricks really yet. These younger guys, you could see there was a lot tighter windows today when Jordan was throwing than there usually is when Coleman and Wilson were out there.
And they don't have the leverage either. I mean, well, some of them do, but Ja'Kai doesn't.
No, Jakai's not a big guy.
He's tiny.
And by the way, Ja'Kai, I just saw a tweet. Ja'Kai got to break the rock. He deserved it today.
He damn sure did.
Yeah. Listen, okay. I think if Keon and Johnny are in the ball game, listen, they're going to send them on go routes, and whether they're designed target or not. If Pitt had done what they were doing defensively with those two ball games, what you're going to see is tight end and slot receivers coming across the middle of the field, right? And they would have been wide open. Things that they didn't worry about. Now, I was a little bit surprised that Pitt, as Mark and I and Fish talked about before you got on, a little bit surprised that Pitt in the second half, they didn't bring as much pressure. They played more coverage, which kind of surprised me in the second half. But you're right. If Johnny and Keon are in there, what they're going to do to complement not only the running backs or the passing game are going to be different, because if you got Keon lined up to the field and they're going to play cover 2, that safety is going to key on Keon, right? I mean, he's going to try to get over the top and help the corner, and that's going to open up something over the middle if you're bringing those linebackers like Pitt was. So the game plan would have been totally different, and I think it's a credit to Florida State. The fact that you had 2 of your top playmakers, you could argue that there were 2 and 3 behind Jordan Travis. You might put Keon in front of Jordan. I don't know. It's to each his own. But I think it's a credit to Florida State that, I felt a lot differently about how this game was going to play out when I found out those 2 cats were going to be missing the game.
Oh, yeah, me too. My prediction would have been a lot different.
I wish you had called me beforehand, because I would have changed my prediction. So.
Well, we didn't know. We didn't know for sure until.
Yeah, we had to.
I think that's ridiculous. I think these injuries and stuff that they should be able to tell you Monday or Tuesday. This waiting before games, I think I don't get it, man.
Well, as long as Mike Norvell allows us to go to practice, I am not saying anything.
Exactly.
I do want to see the players continue to develop, and I think that. Listen, that's the trade-off. We don't talk about injuries, and we get to go watch this team develop throughout the entirety of the season.
And think about it. If Narducci knew on Monday that those 2 dudes were out, he would have really emphasized the defense he ran against us and wouldn't have worried about spending his precious 20 hours on anything to do with what if they show up on Saturday.
Although if they're Las Vegas and if that spread closed at 21.5 points, there were a lot of people that took some bad beats this evening on that game, because I think it closed at 21.5. I could be wrong.
And think about this: we got started on the eye test and what Tuesday might bring. Mike has the ball at the 5-yard line with 30 seconds left, and we're driving. If he scores there, you cover the spread.
Yep.
A lot of people lost money by him letting that game end without, and we lose the 31 point, the 30 scoring.
30 plus scoring streak. Yeah.
Right. I mean, he let all that, go.
And that's weird because, Mike's aggressive no matter where they are in the game. So I guess that tells you what kind of respect he has for Pat Narduzzi, maybe that Pitt football team.
Well, yeah, and that's somewhat of a thing among coaches, isn't it?
Sometimes.
I don't know. I've seen some guys run that shit up on people.
Oregon ran it up pretty good on Arizona State today. When I was going through the scores at halftime, they were 54-3 or something like that. It was crazy. But yeah, listen. It's,
but you'd have thought he'd have been motivated to score on that final drive.
Yep.
To keep the 30-point going for the eye test.
Trust me, there'll be a few boosters at booster meetings that remind him of that.
Yeah,
Well, you know what I think it tells me. I think it tells me that Mike knows they got to go be perfect to get into the playoff, right? And they've done what they. It doesn't matter if they scored 45 points against Pitt today. If they don't beat Miami, they don't beat Florida, their chances going to the playoff are going to be adversely affected. I think he knows that right now he's got a team that has a chance to win out, and that's the only thing that's going to matter because you got to think a 13-0 FSU team is going to go to the playoff, and I think that's all Mike's worried about.
Guaranteed. Honestly, there's not. When was the last time 5 teams went undefeated? It's not. These teams are going to start falling off. So
yeah, we'll see. We might see that today. Some I don't have any idea what the scores are.
And when you talk about eye tests, look at Ohio State in the first half.
Yep,
they weren't exactly lighting it up against Rutgers.
Yeah, they're not. They are the most overrated team in college football. I'll keep saying it. I've watched them play 3 or 4 times. Jerry, we talked about it. That's one matchup. If you're a Florida State fan, you do not mind they play in a bowl game.
Right.
Yeah. Well, listen. Yeah. It was. Go ahead, Jerry. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, if you guaranteed me that they would finish number 1, I would want to finish 4th.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. That if you got to pick one team to play right now out of those top 6 teams that you're not, or those 5 other teams that you're not a part of, I'd gladly take Ohio State over Michigan, Georgia, even a 1-loss Oregon. I don't want to play them. Yeah, I think you're sitting in a pretty good spot, and it's going to be interesting to see what the committee says about Ohio State on Tuesday. Do they fall back? And Georgia beat a 12th ranked Missouri team today. I do know that score. I think that was 30-21. So it will be interesting. But yeah, to go back to your point on taking the knee and not scoring, I think Mike feels like I don't know if they've had enough blowout wins for 7 more points to matter, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it was going to be 7 points, 31-7. I don't think those 7 points were a big deal, other than the streak. I think the streak is that's a pretty cool streak, right? I mean, that's hard to do in college football. So, you can't tweet that out anymore. That's a promotion for your offense, with recruiting.
Well, and yeah, it's a talking point for your advocates.
Yeah. So I think it's again, I think I go back to the point that FSU's defense was not going to allow this game to ever be taken from them, and you couple that with Jordan Travis's performance throwing the ball. If he would have gotten more time in the first half, I think that we would have seen a better offensive output. You can't take those plays away. Pitt did a very good job of pressuring in the first half. I mean, they are a good defense. When I started doing my scouting report, I was like, well, I think maybe this defense is a little bit better than people are giving them credit for. We just saw them get blown out by Notre Dame, and we all have recency bias, and Pitt sucks. And we've seen some 2-6 teams this week play some really good games against opponents they should not be playing against. I think that at the end of the day, I think the important thing is that Florida State did what it had to do and come out with a win, because now it's locked itself. And the goal was to get to Charlotte, right? And so that was the goal today. We win, we go to Charlotte, doesn't matter what it looks like. And you're going to get to play a ranked team. Right now, it looks like Louisville, I think, ran over Virginia Tech today. At least it was not close the last time I looked. That looks like Louisville, the closer we get to the end of the season, looks more likely that that's who you're going to play. And if Louisville wins out, they're going to probably be a top 10 team. And if that's who you're playing the ACC championship game and you beat them in the ACC championship game, that'll offset any 7 points that was or was not scored today. And that takes care of any issues that the eye test may have failed today, I think.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Any parting thoughts, Jerry?
Well, I'm just going to let Fish. I'm going to tee him up on something.
Right.
We're starting to see a couple of those South Florida guys really stepping up. The younger guys, Hussey for one.
Well, your boy did show up today.
Omar Graham is playing well. I mean, not well, but he's playing a lot.
Playing more, yes.
Yeah, and he's gaining experience. And Peyton. I mean, that guy's batting down a lot of balls, and except for getting his hands on people's faces, I like it that he's getting hands on a lot of footballs. He's batted down more balls, I think, than any defensive end I can remember.
Hey, Fish, I got something for you.
Sure.
This would be a great time for Mike Norvell to get in touch with Jeremiah Smith and say, hey, Jeremiah, you come to us, you're going to get Keon's catches next year.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm sure that's what he's selling them. I mean, if you look, I said from the beginning, Keon Coleman has Jeremiah Smith's number, and I don't think that's by accident. I think there's a reason why Keon switched to number 4. That's Jeremiah Smith's number, and I think he's trying to land them. I mean, those guys are hard to find, and you see what Keon's done. Their offense was totally different without him today. If you have a chance to bring in somebody very similar skill set, you got to bring them in.
I will say this: they panned over to Keon during close to the half, and he started running in place. I thought for a quick second. Now, I know Mike was not going to let him. I get that. But I thought for a quick second he's going to go to Mike and say, hey, Coach, whatever's bothering me feels pretty good. Put me in the ball game. Because he was just sitting on the sideline jogging in place. And he looked over at Johnny Wilson, and his facial expression was, I kind of feel all right. So, but anyway, yeah, hopefully we'll see plenty of Keon and Johnny on Saturday, either at noon or 7:30. I think that's the 2 time slots they've got designated for Miami. I could be wrong. Or it could be 3:30.
Is it possibly a night game or no?
I think it's going to be a night game. We'll find out tomorrow, or we may find out by the end of the night tonight. To be honest with you, but listen, I think that game's going to be fascinating. Jerry, did Fish get a chance to answer your question? I can't remember.
No, he didn't.
Okay,
What
go
was
ahead.
the question?
Talk about Hussey and Peyton.
Oh yeah.
Graham.
Yeah, I just think you know as well as I do the number one thing with a lot of those guys from South Florida. The physical talent's there. It's just the mental side of it. So sometimes fans get a little impatient with them coming on campus and learning more sophisticated schemes than they're used to, because they're basically asked to do very little in high school down there. It's use your athletic ability, make plays, and then you get to college. It's the schemes and the expectations of what they have to do. So I think you're starting to see the results of the patience with those guys. Hussey's been better than expected. I think he's played very, very well. I mean, you got to be excited about the future of him, and they're bringing in the kid from Buford next year. They're going to have 2 very good safeties, as good as they've had in the history of that school, and they've had some great safeties. Patrick Payton, the whole thing with him is, he had to round out his game, being more than just a pass rusher. You got to still be able to stop the run when you're in there, and he's gotten better at that. And Omar was a project. The fact that he's even on the field right now tells you how much he's improved as a player. And a lot of that's probably because he's a very smart kid. I remember meeting him after he had committed to Florida State. He's not your typical South Florida kid. He just seemed very mature at a younger age, and the results are starting to bear off from what they've brought in.
Well, listen, they'll have a chance to play against their hometown team next week. And but Jerry was right. Jerry called Hussey all preseason camp. He said that kid's going to play, and that kid has played well, and he's been put in the ball game, and he has been better than most true freshmen. Jerry's got a
good eye for talent. I've been with him, and honestly, he's got a sneaky good eye for talent, man. He fools you with his looks and everything, but that guy knows talent, man.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, listen, we're going to see a ton of talent on the field next week when Florida State hosts Miami. We'll be back throughout the week. We will have our live reaction show to the College Football Playoff Committee on Tuesday night. We will start around 6:45, 6:50. So if you don't already subscribe to the Osceola YouTube channel, please take this time while you're watching this, either live or taped, to go ahead and subscribe to the Osceola YouTube channel. You can actually hit alerts, and you will get notifications when we go live. We will obviously be back during the week. Bob and Kurt are in Pittsburgh tonight covering the game. We will have all kind of post-game reaction from Mike Norvell and the players they send our way to interview. We're hoping that Kurt or Bob might be able to jump on with us and tell us what they heard in the post game. But they will be back with us on Tuesday night. We'll get some more feedback from them. We also have Second Watch Sunday or Second Look Sunday, where the Osceola staff will go back through the television copy and try to come up with some more detailed notes, some more breakdowns of what we saw. We'll start that sometime on Sunday morning, and depending, we'll be on and off there throughout the day. Jerry will be involved. I'll be involved. Fish, we obviously loved your comments too as you watch the game. So please subscribe to the Osceola YouTube channel. If you're not a subscriber to the Osceola, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com and check us out. We will have plenty of coverage of this game and leading up to Miami, as one of the most storied rivalries in college football history is going to renew itself in 6.5 days from now. I know that this staff will be really fired up for this game because I think Jerry's least favorite opponent is Florida. My least favorite opponent is Miami. And I hate to say that because my good old friend Todd Stroud is on the staff down there. And I hope Todd has a long night next Saturday. I hope I get a chance to catch up with him. But we will have plenty of coverage at theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. But again, Florida State rolls to the ACC championship game with a 24-7 win over Pitt on the road, on the river. And they will keep on rolling as they're 9-0 and look to make it 10-0 next week against the Hurricanes. For Jerry and Charles and for Sully, that's Mark Salva. For you guys that don't know, we will see you guys on Tuesday night. Thanks, guys, for joining me. And Jerry, you get to sign us off.
Oh. Scalp them.
That's right.